Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. The 13th and final round of the Tata Steel tournament was something of an anticlimax for the winner, Magnus Carlsen. Of course, he picked up a free point in the final round because Daniel Dubov had withdrawn. And there were a couple of short draws as well. Mamedyarov and Caruana and Giri and Rapport drew very quickly. But the other games were really hard fought, and I'm going to show you one of them. Ramesh Babu Praggnanandhaa against Andrey Esipenko. So two of the younger players in the tournament. Praggnanandhaa is 16 years old and Yesipenko 19. Prag rated way below everyone else in the tournament, but well, he's already shown that he has real bite. And found it really interesting to see the opening he played in this final game. He played the Zamish variation. Now, we've already seen this in the game between Van Foreest and Giri, where Giri was completely outplayed, was absolutely mashed by Van Foreest. So we're seeing a little bit of a trend. Looks like it. It's a very old variation and really had its heyday in, I would say, in the 50s. But yeah, openings come in and out of fashion. So in that Van Foreest Giri game, we saw this, and Giri went directly for the pawn on c4. I don't think it's a bad way to play for black. I always played in that way. I think it's reasonable, but he went wrong. It's very double-edged. Yesipenko went for c5, also very respectable. And instead of f3 and e4, we had e3 from Prag. And this is kind of the traditional way for white to play. And knight e2. So, this is one of the ideas of the Zamish, is that you don't commit the knight very early, so you can put it on e2, and that means, you're ready to advance the f-pawn. Different story when the knight is on f3. So b6, e4. Now white has a threat to pin with bishop g5, so the knight comes back to e8. I know this might look a very strange way for black to play. It's actually, this used to be the main line in this opening in the 1950s, or well, it goes back even earlier actually. And bishop a6, so black starts this traditional attack on the c-pawn. Well, I said, this is a very old way of playing for white. There's a game, for example, Jona against Capablanca from 1929, which went bishop e3 here. And, well, Kappa won a very nice game. There's Geller against Smyslov, famous game from Zurich 1953, the candidates tournament. Smyslov also won that in fine strategic style. But really f4 is, I think, the real test for black. I think, white has to go for it on the king side. If you get bogged down trying to defend this pawn, or just playing in a slower way, then I think it just plays into black's hands. You have to play very aggressively. And f5, this is again the traditional way of playing to block this pawn, which means that this bishop doesn't look so good in this position. So now white really has a task to try to open the position for those bishops. If white doesn't somehow shake things up, then black is going to be able to attack that c-pawn, and white is going to be in big trouble. So pawn takes pawn, and then pawn takes pawn on c5. So completely different way of playing to other variations where white sort of claims a space advantage with d5 or sometimes e5. Bishop e3 attacks this one, and d6. this has been seen in many games, many old games. For example, there's a game that Spassky played in 1963 where he had white. I'd like to show you that to you afterwards, actually. I should say it's Spassky's 85th birthday today, the 30th of January. So I want to pay a little tribute to him after this game. Spassky actually played rook b1 there, but knight g3 is the most popular move here. It's interesting, Pragg would have known all this. Of course, he was playing his moves very, very quickly up to this point. And here g6 is the most popular move. And, well, we saw this played by Carlsen last year, this variation. Carlsen Nakamura, in an online game from last year. Carlsen actually lost this game with white. But, well, he got a reasonable position. But instead of g6... Yesipenko thought for 10 minutes and played 97. I think that's interesting that, while Pragg was playing these moves very quickly, Yesipenko, obviously a little bit unfamiliar with the variation. I'm sure, he knew of its existence, but he was kind of feeling his way through. So this pawn had to be defended. And with this, Yesipenko finds a very different strategy to normal. Queen f3 played by Pragg, which seems reasonable, but maybe it's better to... basically white has a clear plan here, and that's to play rook e1, and then bishop f2, and then knight f1 to e3. That's very standard in these kind of positions, but maybe he should have done that straight away. But anyway, queen f3, knight c7, rook b1, rook on an open file, fair enough, queen d7, and now rook e1. g6, so Yesipenko goes for this anyway, and bishop f2, so now we see this plan in action. So knight c8, now we see why Yesipenko went for this knight e7 move, because he wants to put it on b6 to attack the pawn on c4, but also close the b file. And he's thought this through very carefully, and it's a very interesting plan. But now we see this maneuver that I mentioned earlier, which could have been played without queen f3 and rook b1. So knight b6, the knight and bishop attack this pawn, and knight e3 defends it. This is a really important maneuver because the knight was doing nothing on g3. On e3 obviously defends this pawn, but also looks at the d5 square. That's really important. So this is a very well-known maneuver, and this bishop pops out to h4. Well, we saw this in the Fanfare-Skiri game as well, that this bishop, which wasn't doing too much on c1, has found its way to a very good diagonal here. Queen g7 hits the pawn on c3, so rook c1. And over these last few moves, Pragg was taking more time. He sort of played all his normal, natural moves, but now he's having to think things through carefully, as Yesipenko has done something a little bit different. Rook e6. Now, really creative plan by Pragg at this moment. So, something like h3 looks plausible to me, which gives the king some room here, and one could perhaps consider playing g4 later on. But Pragg goes for a4 after a little think. Very interesting. Obviously wants to push the knight. So knight takes pawn. So that drags the knight away from the d5 square, or controlling the d5 square. Now knight d5. Now it's obviously getting a little tricky. White is really active. These really nice pieces, and opening up the e-file. So, that's a disaster for black with this pin. So bishop b7, an exchange of rooks, and rook e1. So pawn sacrifice, but this knight is now on d5, and a little bit of pressure here. And here is actually a very, very important moment in the game. Now, I'm not sure of the time situation. I'd actually dived off from watching the game live. I was looking at the tennis, which was pretty amazing. I think if you're a tennis fan, you'll know exactly. It was the Australian Open final. Incredible game. Anyway, so I'm not sure of the time situation here, but over the next few moves, it looks to me like there was a bit of time pressure involved. Queen d7 played by Yesipenko. g5, a really critical move, but that looks like a better chance. I mean, that involves a lot of calculation, and it's very tricky tactical variations. But Queen d7, which I guess looks kind of normal, but actually this is a mistake. And here, Pragg played Queen g3 after 11 minutes thought. Queen f2 is a really strong move. Now, why is this strong? Well, let's have a look. If bishop takes, basically the queen wants to shuffle over here. This is the point. And if bishop takes, knight drops back, rook e7, and queen a2 is fantastically strong, looking down at a7. But he played queen g3, which is also a very testing move, also pretty good for white. And here, well, this knight should be removed. It looks very frightening for black, but it is the best chance. I mean, it's a really difficult position, but yeah, white certainly looks better. But rook f7 is just a mistake because Pragg just won an exchange. Now, it is a bit tricky still because white is left with these bishops. I mean, particularly the one on d3 doesn't look very good. And these pawns, well, it could be a little bit weak. So black is solid, and that bishop is superb. So breaking black's position down is not easy. But let's see what Pragg did. Queen c6. See, this is the problem. Yesipenko is banking on the fact that, you know, white's pieces aren't brilliant, and that, you know, these pieces look pretty good. But let's see. Knight takes bishop, and bishop c8. And here, actually, this is why I think there was time pressure involved, because there's a kind of natural attacking move. I think if one had more time, then one would spot g4. Or at least, I'm sure Pragg spotted it, but didn't have time to calculate it out. If that's taken, then like this, the queen breaks through. If f takes, then this is decisive because rook f1 is coming. And if bishop b7, that's a scary move, but actually the check doesn't get anywhere. King just comes to f2. So g4 would have been immediately decisive. But queen e3 played, which basically just keeps the advantage. Queen e2, so this queen is looking to come over here again. It's a good idea. If knight c3, then queen b2, and the queen will get through on f6. Queen d8. Queen a2. So, I mean, really, Pragg has played it safe. He can see that technically he's winning this position. And it's just a case of breaking through. I mean, basically, black tries to construct a kind of fortress, but really, it looks hopeless. White is going to find a way through with these active pieces. If bishop takes c4, then rook a8 is rather embarrassing for the queen. So Yesipenko played queen c8. That's interesting. I mean, white could just duck back with the queen and keep the pressure, and I'm sure find a way in. But Pragg preferred just to keep it very, very simple. Just exchange queens. I mean, he knows that in this position, black is suffering. Could have played bishop a4 straight away, which I rather like actually, just to activate this. But again, he played it very simply. Bishop b3, and just kept up pressure with the rook. And brought his king up the board. You know, black can't do very much at all here. So Pragg was just letting his opponent stew in his own juice. And eventually Yesipenko just cracked. So there's a lot of shuffling going on, but that's no problem. You just let your opponent sweat. They can't do very much. And finally this bishop activates. If bishop takes pawn, then bishop e8 gets in. And that actually happens in a couple of moves anyway. And here bishop e6 is just a blunder because of bishop e8. Here actually Yesipenko resigned. If, let's say, knight e7, then this is the simplest way for white to play. You take here, and then you take on h5, and the bishop comes back, the h-pawn pushes, the king comes to f4. I mean, this one drops as well. 2 connected pass pawns is too much. Of course, I mean, black could have been a bit more resilient with king d8, but I mean, ultimately, white is going to find a way in. I mean, one way is to bring the king over here. Another way is to bring the bishop to d5, actually, and exchange bishops. Anyway, that was the final position, bishop e8, and a really nice victory for Praggnanandhaa. So the Zamish variation, something to be reckoned with. I mentioned earlier a little tribute to Spassky. I'll give you the final scores in the tournament in a second, but let me just follow up on that. Spassky is 85 today. One of my chess heroes. You know, I grew up, I was part of the Fischer Spassky Reykjavik 72 generation. That's when I became really enthused with chess. And yeah, I've always liked Spassky, just his personality and his playing style. Here, a game he played in 1963, just by chance, Spassky against Bukov, Leningrad 1963. He played rook b1. So let's see how Spassky did it. And bishop f2. So he went for exactly this maneuver. Shifting the knight round to f1. Improving the bishop. And bishop e2 just pushes this knight back. And knight e3. So, you know, it's this maneuver I was talking about that Pragg also got in. You know, this is absolutely key to this variation for white. If you don't improve the position of the knight, then yeah, white isn't doing very well. But this is a beautiful position, guarding the c-pawn but looking at d5. And this is already quite tough for black, actually. You know, this bishop has definitely improved its position from going from d3 to f3, looking down here. And white's pieces just make complete sense now. Let's have a quick look. The game went knight e4, knight d5, bishop f3. And here, a really nice move from Spassky. Rook takes knight. If pawn takes, then the queen is kind of trapped. If rook e6 takes, and well, white ends up a piece up and wins. In the game, this happened. Rook takes, knight f6 check, and Spassky won the exchange. And shortly after the game, funny, isn't it, how white wins an exchange on f6, just as in the Pragg Yesipenko game as well. Funny that. Anyway, happy birthday to Spassky. Let's just check out the final scores. So Magnus Carlsen won with 9.5 out of 13. Of course, the results were slightly distorted by Dubov's withdrawal from the tournament. Nevertheless, it was a convincing victory, particularly when one sees that the players in just coming after, so Mamedyarov, Rapport and Giri, so Mamedyarov and Rapport on 8 out of 13, Giri on 7.5. Carlsen defeated all 3 of those players. So really convincing victory for Carlsen. And he gained 3 ELO points, not very much. It's tough when your rating is very, very high. I should mention that Praggnanandhaa finished with 5.5 out of 13. I mean, he was rated way below everyone else, so he did extremely well. Yeah, in that final round there was some very exciting games actually. Karyakin won. Van Foreys beat Shankland. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah. Yeah, Karyakin defeated Vidit. Okay, folks, I think that's all from me for the time being. It was an incredible tournament. Once again, the organisers did a brilliant job of bringing together this very interesting mix of players, players at the top, but up-and-coming players as well, and they're to be applauded. Thanks for watching. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.